The computerized guillotine dropped without a single sound. In the sterile antiseptic world of the internet, a digital eraser moved across the official website of the British royal family, and just like that, the names Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor were gone. This wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't a maintenance error. It was a constitutional execution. While the world was looking at red carpets and California sunshine, the House of Windsor was engaging in a hushed thunderclap of a conflict that had finally reached its breaking point. This move was the direct, icy response to a single sentence spoken an ocean away, a sentence that the palace perceived not as a mother's pride, but as an absolute declaration of war against the future King of England. It all started in a room filled with the power-brokering elite of Hollywood. In early January, at a private PR meeting where perception is the only currency that matters, Meghan Markle reportedly let slip 12 words that would change everything. Archie has a lot more spark than George. He was meant for the limelight. To a casual observer, it sounded like a mother's harmless boast. But in a room full of strategists trained to dissect every syllable, it was a strike at the very heart of the monarchy. It was a challenge to the 1,000-year-old line of succession framing the British throne not as a matter of birthright and duty, but as a talent contest that Prince George was somehow losing. When the news of this comparison reached Buckingham Palace, it didn't arrive with a shout. It arrived with a sorrowful, deliberate silence. The institution that values hierarchy above all else saw this as an attempt to relitigate the lottery of birth. The palace didn't issue a denial or an angry statement. They did something much more permanent. They updated the digital records, signaling a finality that suggested the crown was finished with negotiations. But the digital removal was only the final act of a drama that had been simmering for years, rooted in deep-seated questions about Archie's arrival. While the public was fed a fairy tale of the 2019 birth at Portland Hospital, a different story was allegedly developing behind the scenes. By mid-2025, the facade began to crack when a leak from a constitutional oversight office brought a secret file into the light. This file allegedly contained a scanned intake form from the Santa Barbara Fertility Center dated April 2019. The details were explosive. In the section for the maternal source, the form reportedly listed a coded donor ID with the notation donor oocyte non-relative. While Meghan's name was on the document, she was allegedly listed as the intended parent rather than the biological mother. In the rigid ancient world of British royal law, this was a catastrophe. The British monarchy isn't just a family. It's a legal construct governed by the Act of Settlement of 1701, which requires a legitimate biological lineage. If these documents were accurate, it meant a fundamental breach of the rules that justify the entire royal dynasty. The discovery cast a new, ominous light on the long-standing controversies that had puzzled royal watchers for years. People began to point toward the glaring absence of a formal public royal christening for the children, while the public was told it was a private choice to protect them from the media. Insiders now claim the reality was far more complicated. There are no records of a formal baptism in the royal archives, and the legendary lily font, the silver-gilded vessel used for every royal infant since Queen Victoria, was never requested. Without a proper ceremony conducted by the Church of England, Archie was never formally welcomed into the faith that the king is sworn to defend. This created a massive silent gap in the chain of legitimacy, a ticking time bomb that was kept quiet during the 2020 Sandringham Summit. Back then, a secret clause, Clause 7. Paragraph 3 was reportedly signed a mutual agreement of silence where the sovereign would withhold scrutiny into the lineage in exchange for the Sussexes withdrawing from public duty. It was a non-disclosure agreement of historic proportions, but it was a peace treaty built on the condition of absolute quiet. That peace treaty officially died with the release of Spare and the various media projects that followed, when the silent truce was broken by public attacks on King Charles and Prince William. The palace decided the gloves were off. The protection the crown had provided for the Sussexes was no longer guaranteed, but it wasn't a tabloid leak that delivered the final blow. It was a routine government audit of the sovereign grant. Investigators looking into the refurbishment costs of Frogmore Cottage reportedly found a trail of payments leading to a Delaware-based shell company called Arch Genesis LLC. The line items were chillingly specific, nearly $100,000 in surrogacy agency fees and over $110,000 in legal facilitation. Most damning was a final payment of $82,000 listed as a live birth disbursement for candidate 6. The timing of these payments aligned perfectly with the months leading up to May 2019. This wasn't just about genealogy anymore. It was about the alleged misuse of taxpayer funds to support a covert operation. The palace's counter-offensive was conducted in the arena of constitutional law, led by the pragmatic Princess Anne, and supported by a grieving King Charles. In January 2026, the king signed a legal update to the letters patent that was a masterpiece of judicial precision. It introduced the term lawful biological union as a requirement for the line of succession. It was a razor-sharp scalpel designed to surgically remove any ambiguity, declaring that rights of title and succession would be reserved only for those born of a biological union between a royal descendant and their recognized spouse. This change was both retroactive and permanent. Within 36 hours of the king's signature, the names Archie and Lilibet vanished from the website. While some saw it as petty retribution, those inside the palace viewed it as the organization finally safeguarding its own survival. Meghan, however, did not retreat. She launched a bold rebranding effort under a new holding company called Royal Reclamation. The campaign was a direct assault on the court of public opinion, featuring children's loungewear and a picture book titled The Little Lion Heart. The book's illustrations were a thinly veiled metaphor showing a dark-haired boy standing in the shadows while a blonde-haired boy was crowned by elderly royals. It portrayed Prince George as the recipient of a stolen birthright. To Princess Catherine, who has spent years shielding her children from the spotlight, this was the ultimate breach of trust. It wasn't just a venting of frustrations. It was a deliberate attempt to rewrite history for the next generation. But Catherine's response was a lesson in royal strategy. She didn't use words, she used symbols. At a charity event in Leeds, she appeared wearing the Jubilee Star brooch, a precious artifact reserved for the direct heirs to the throne. The message was clear. Without a single word being spoken, the crown had already decided the future. Just when the world thought the conflict had peaked, the monarchy played a card that no one could beat. It came from beyond the grave. On February 29, 2026, the Royal Archives at Windsor opened a private letter sealed by the late Queen Elizabeth II under Kensington Protocol 14C. The envelope, marked with her signature script, to be opened when tested, contained a letter to the Lord Chamberlain dated October 2022. In it, the late Queen wrote, "I have seen enough. Undeserved titles are no longer owed. Those who neglect duty cannot claim its privilege." It was a seismic event. The Queen, known for her lifelong neutrality, had left a final verdict that Archie and Lilibet were never part of her vision for the monarchy's destiny. It was the final strike in the battle for legitimacy. The aftermath was swift. King Charles summoned a special council to formalize the royal line, ensuring that hereditary titles would only flow through Prince William's descendants. While Meghan's media strategy began to falter, with podcasts being pulled and charity auctions facing scrutiny, Catherine continued her work personifying the royal ideal of service over drama. The final word, however, came from Princess Anne. When asked by a reporter if a reconciliation with Prince Harry was possible after their tense meeting at Gatcombe Park, she replied with a cold, unflinching honesty, "One cannot reconcile with tactics." It was a brutal epitaph for the Sussex's campaign. What began as a mother's attempt to elevate her child by challenging another's fate ended in a total constitutional shutdown. The monarchy, an institution built on tradition and survival, proved that it doesn't compete for legitimacy. It simply exists. The digital erasure of Archie and Lilibet was just the visible tip of a very large, very cold iceberg. To understand why the palace took such a drastic step, we have to look at the documents that were never supposed to see the light of day. Behind the scenes, a specialized team of forensic accountants had been quietly combing through the sovereign grant records for months. What they found wasn't just a simple accounting error. It was a complex web of transactions that pointed toward a massive coordinated effort to bypass royal protocol. The trail led directly to a shell company in Delaware, a state known for its ironclad privacy laws called Arch Genesis LLC. The payments listed in the audit were chilling in their precision. When investigators saw the $82,000 disbursement for Candidate 6, the room reportedly went silent. In the world of high-end covert surrogacy, Candidate 6 isn't a name, it's a file. This was the moment the of-the-body clause of the British Constitution moved from a theoretical debate to a legal crisis. If public funds money meant for the upkeep of historic monuments and the functioning of the state were used to facilitate a private overseas birth that bypassed the traditional royal doctors and the Home Secretary's verification, it wasn't just a family secret. It was a potential financial crime against the British public. The palace knew that if this information leaked through a third party, the damage to the monarchy would be irreversible. They had to strike first, and they had to strike with absolute finality. But the financial trail was only one piece of the puzzle. While the accountants were following the money, the royal legal team was following the words. Every interview, every podcast episode, and every chapter of Prince Harry's memoir Spare was being cross-referenced with the Sandringham Agreement. The palace's enforcer, a role many believe was taken on by Prince William himself, was looking for a specific legal trigger. They found it in the way Harry described his children's birthrights. By framing their status as a bargaining chip and publicly criticizing the very institution that grants those titles, the legal team argued that the Sussexes had effectively entered a voluntary withdrawal. You see, in royal law, a title isn't just a name, it's a job description. If you publicly resign from the job and attack the employer, the perks of that job, like the titles for your descendants, can be legally challenged. The tension reached a fever pitch during a secret meeting at Highgrove where King Charles reportedly sat with his advisors to discuss the California insurgency. This wasn't just about Meghan and Harry anymore. It was about the precedent they were setting for the entire Commonwealth. If the line of succession could be treated like a celebrity popularity contest, the entire foundation of the monarchy would crumble. It was during this meeting that the decision was made to update the letters patent. This wasn't a petty move, as some supporters claimed. It was a structural reinforcement. By defining lawful biological union so strictly, the king was essentially building a firewall around the throne. He was ensuring that the future of the monarchy, specifically Prince George's future, could never be challenged by someone who didn't follow the ancient rules of the crown. Meanwhile, in Montecito, the atmosphere was reportedly shifting from defiance to desperation. As the Royal Reclamation brand struggled to gain traction, the backlash over the Little Lionheart book began to alienate even their most loyal Hollywood allies. A-list celebrities who had once flocked to the Sussexes were beginning to see them as radioactive. In the high-stakes world of Hollywood, nobody wants to be on the losing side of a war with a 1,000-year-old institution. When the brand's toddler t-shirts featuring the Future Monarch slogan were released, the mockery was swift and brutal. Industry insiders noted that the trademark filings for Royal Reclamation were being challenged in court not by the palace, but by established heritage brands that saw the Sussexes move as a cheapening of the royal name. This loss of social capital in California coincided with the palace's most powerful move, yet the opening of the vault. The Kensington Protocol 14C is not something used lightly. It is a set of instructions left by a deceased monarch to be used only in the event of a total constitutional breakdown. On that cold morning in February, when the red wax seal of Queen Elizabeth II was finally broken, the room felt the weight of history. The Queen had always been known for her never complain, never explain mantra, but her private letter revealed a woman who was deeply concerned about the erosion of duty. Her words, "I have seen enough," were a direct reference to the media blitz that had characterized the last few years. She hadn't just left a letter, she had left a roadmap for how to handle the Sussex problem. She knew that her son Charles would face a challenge to his authority, and she provided him with the moral ammunition he needed to act. The letter's mention of Charlotte and Louis was particularly telling. By saying, "Keep Charlotte's dignity, protect its elegance," Louis the Queen was signaling that the true future of the Spare line lay with William's children, not Harry's. It was a devastating blow to the narrative that all royal grandchildren were equal in the eyes of the crown. In the hierarchy of the Windsor family, service is the only currency that matters. Those who don't serve don't get a seat at the table. This message from beyond the grave gave the palace the divine right to move forward with the digital erasure. They weren't just following the king's orders, they were following the late queen's final wish. As the news of the letter's contents began to leak through authorized channels, the Sussexes' response was uncharacteristically quiet. There were no bombshell interviews, no emergency press releases. Rumors began to circulate that the legal team in London had sent a notice of discovery to the Sussexes' lawyers, hinting that if the Royal Reclamation campaign didn't stop, the full details of the Arch Genesis audit would be turned over to the Parliamentary committee. It was a checkmate move. The palace was essentially saying, keep the titles you have left, stay in California, and be quiet, or we show the world the receipts. This silent war has fundamentally changed the way the world views the British royal family. It is no longer just a story of a family feud. It is a masterclass in institutional survival. Princess Catherine's subtle use of the Jubilee Star brooch wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a signal to the 54 nations of the Commonwealth that the true line was secure. While Meghan was filming content for a failing podcast, Catherine was kneeling in a hospital ward, reinforcing the image of the mother of the future king. The contrast was so sharp, it was blinding. The public's reaction was immediate, with approval ratings for the Prince and Princess of Wales reaching record highs, while the Sussexes' numbers continued to plummet into unfavorable territory. The final chapter of this saga was written at Gatcombe Park. When Princess Anne gave her "one cannot reconcile with tactics" response, she wasn't just talking about a single meeting. She was talking about an entire philosophy of life. To the Windsors, Harry and Meghan aren't family members with a grievance. They are tacticians, using the monarchy's name to build a commercial empire. And in the game of crowns, tactics will always lose to tradition. The digital guillotine was just the beginning. The palace has spent 1,000 years learning how to outlast its enemies, and it seems they have done it once again. The names Archie and Lilibet may be gone from the website, but the lesson they left behind will be studied by constitutional historians for centuries. The crown does not negotiate. It does not compromise. It simply endures. As we look toward the future, the question remains, what will become of the lost princes of California? Separated from their birthright by a digital eraser and a secret file, their path forward is uncertain. Will they grow up to be the stars their mother envisioned, or will they be the cautionary tale of what happens when you challenge the weight of a 1,000-year throne? One thing is for certain, the House of Windsor has closed its doors, and the locks have been changed forever.